All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for eating and staying. So welcome to our third panel of the day. My name, again, is Noah Zatz. I have the pleasure of moderating this panel on racial neoliberalism and white supremacy. So just a couple of words of introduction. So as has come up a couple of times throughout the day, there's this questions of, on the one hand, forms of continuity, and also questions of change. And so, one of the issues throughout is how much should we understand change as a matter of amplification or clarification of what was already present, or that maybe in some combination with important forms of transformation, which isn't the same as radical difference, but nonetheless not simple continuity. And so one of the prompts for people thinking about the question of transformation, not the only one, is that some people, especially on the white left, have kind of said, well, wait, this whole racism thing is really different than what I thought was going on, which was neoliberalism, where neoliberalism, right, was understood as being about an instrumental market instrumental logic of the market, which precisely by treating people as things ignores difference among people. And so race isn't supposed to be part of neoliberalism. So that's one of the thoughts, that there's something surprising and seemingly different going on. And of course, that's something that I think most of us in the room reject, and in particular are concerned about the ways in which talking about class or talking about neoliberalism has sometimes been used as a way to not talk about race or to deny the importance of race. And so part of the thought is, on the one hand, resisting that erasure of race, but on the other hand, also thinking about the risk that emphasizing the centrality of race not become a reason not to talk about capitalism, right? So avoiding both of those one, not the other kinds of moves. And one of the reasons why there's a sense that maybe there are something different going on or new going on with regard to questions of economic systems is that there do seem to be some shifts relative to the kind of political orthodoxy on the right with regard to economic policy that have been associated with neoliberalism, right? So Trump has rejected the framework of free trade. Free trade used to be a signature element on the right. It's closely associated with neoliberalism. We also see right now in the news this kind of rupture to some extent, or at least fracture in the Republican Party between the Paul Ryan project, classic neoliberal project of dismantling Social Security and Medicare, and that's not something that Trump has signed on to in quite the same way. So there's something going on, maybe, about neoliberalism. And the point about free trade in particular raises the way in which neoliberalism has also been linked to the idea of globalization, and in turn to the way that Trumpism has been articulated as anti-globalist in its nationalism. And that's obviously in tension with the quite different forms of global formations that we've been talking about today, but so that raises the question of multiple kinds of globalisms that I think is worth engaging, and we'll hear more about on this panel. So I think one of the challenges that I think we face analytically in this moment is to think intersectionally about white supremacy and neoliberalism in ways that help us see racism as constitutive of neoliberalism, which is something that we've talked about, I think, a bit already today. But also it means seeing neoliberal forms of economic extraction and stratification as also constitutive of what white supremacy is. Right? And so that's a kind of double movement that we're hoping to engage both on this panel and more generally. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our panelists who have lengthy and well-deserved biographies in the program. And I'll just say very briefly in the order that we'll have people speaking. We have Cheryl Harris in the law school, the Rosalind and Arthur Gilbert Professor in Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, as well as my fellow faculty co-director in the Critical Race Studies program. We have Shireen Razak, wonderfully newly arrived at UCLA, the Distinguished Professor and Penny Canner Endowed Chair in Women's Studies in the Department of Gender Studies, and also Shannon Speed, not quite as recently arrived, but who was associate professor in the Department of Anthropology, and also the director of Native American and I thought the title was American Indian Studies Center. Is there also another title? Yeah. Okay. So, director of the American Indian Studies Center. So, without further ado, we're going to go back to the sort of ideally 10 minutes per person, and then back and forth among us, and then turning it over to the audience for further discussion.